Okay, I think we can start, everyone. We've got 80 participants so far, and people are still flooding in, but we are 2 minutes over the time, so let's kick off. It's my very great pleasure to welcome you to the African Innovation for Inclusive Healthcare discussion today. We don't often have the words African and innovation in the same sentence, and so I'm particularly excited about that. Sitting as I am in Cape Town, about to showcase an organization that I have great respect for, which is the Holistic Drug Discovery and Development Center, H3D for short. I think we'll all agree that in the past 3 years we've been through a lot. The pandemic has shown us very, very clearly the holes in the global health structure, and no bigger hole than Africa's dependence on outsiders for access to medicines in particular. We were sitting on this continent watching people in the global north getting their vaccines, and India had closed its borders and was not allowing generic vaccines out, and it was just that deja vu again. When are we going to get vaccines? And then so those of us who are like me, I'm a journalist. I write about these things and lament about them, but I'm happy to say that there are people who don't just lament, but they're actually trying to do something about it. And H3D has been trying for many years to address the lack of drug discovery and development on the African continent. So we are going to have a keynote discussion by the head of H3D, and then we are going to move into a panel discussion with some of the people who are helping this infrastructure to develop, and so that we do have drug innovation in Africa. So I'm going to hand over to, I think, probably the person that everybody is here to listen to, and that is Professor Kelly Chibali, who is the Neville Isdell Chair in African-Centric Drug Discovery and Development at the University of Cape Town, where he is also Professor of Organic Chemistry. He is going to tell us about H3D and its spin-off, the H3D Foundation, that is focusing on skills development. So, Kelly, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerry, for the very kind introduction, and thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Yeah, I think as Kerry was really highlighting, if we look back to the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that in addition to highlighting just how the public health infrastructure in Africa was challenged, but also the importance of in our continent to boost local innovation and local manufacturing. Clearly, we cannot wait, as Kerry was alluding to, for solutions to be imported in. You know, all it takes is supply chain issues to emerge. But the question is, we have learned lessons. We know what needs to be done. But how can we actually respond with action? So if I look at, for example, the question of manufacturing, what does it take to actually really do manufacturing in a local context? So obviously the critical ingredients is that, you know, it's one thing really to talk about local manufacturing. It's another to have the appropriate technologies and the skills that are needed to bring about that manufacturing. And so really I'm going to try and focus a lot on those aspects. And I think when we go into the panel discussions, my colleagues could go in much deeper detail. But let me start by providing, first of all, the African context in terms of just framing the innovation, health innovation context in Africa. And then I'll move on to really talk about the capacity building as a driver of innovation. And then something that we've really been really proud of, which is the model that really has gotten H3D to this point, which is really the model of networks of partnerships, that we cannot wait until everything is in place, that there's something we can do, and there are models that we can really share with everybody else. And then I'll finish off with, what are the lessons that we really have learned, reflecting on the journey that we've had. So let me start with just the African context. So first of all, there's no question when we talk about health innovation, that the challenge of access to resources, I'm talking about investments, the low levels of investments in health innovation, the challenge of having a critical mass of skilled scientists, the challenge of infrastructure, and when I talk about infrastructure, this is not just talking about physical buildings or functional laboratories, but it's systems, our ability to even order reagents, et cetera, et cetera. Lack of access to markets and incentives to carry out innovations. All these things really present unique challenges for our continent to be able to foster health innovation. And yet we saw during the pandemic, the critical role that African scientists played, not just in identification of new variants of the COVID pandemic, but also just the ability to contribute to solutions to a global pandemic, I think was quite evident. But the question is, how do we scale that up in a much more sustainable way is really the challenge here. But there's no question, I think, as COVID highlighted, that in Africa, we have the scientific capabilities to really make a contribution to skills development and local manufacturing. So what have we been doing in H3D? And I'll give just one example of how we have been working with partners to expand the ecosystem and community of drug discovery in Africa. And I'll give just two examples. One is a partnership that we have with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And the other partnership is with Johnson & Johnson. These are just very practical examples of how the networks of partnerships model has enabled us to really begin to make a difference in terms of developing the critical mass of skills that we need to really undertake health innovation. So the first example is the Grand Challenges Africa Drug Discovery Initiative. So this is a program that we started with the Gates Foundation back in 2018, but also in partnership with the Medicines for Malaria Venture, working together to promote health innovation on the continent in such a way that participants in this network really focus on prosecuting or executing projects, have access to the H3D infrastructure that we have available. And of course, this is not something that we can really undertake without the necessary resources that I was talking about earlier. But access to the H3D infrastructure, access to the H3D network of pharmaceutical companies. And this is really beginning to have an ecosystem of drug discovery across the continent that we didn't see just 5 years ago. The second example is we had been working with Johnson & Johnson since the year 2016. And this was a program to build capacity, addressing the gaps that we had in H3D in terms of gaps in the infrastructure, gaps in technologies. And this program really has morphed into what is today a Johnson & Johnson Satellite Center for Global Health Discovery. And I think that the biggest lesson from this example is that when you build capacity, as was the case with the Johnson & Johnson example, we have to engage with the capabilities that we develop. So when we keep investing in capacity building, one of the reasons, of course, that we have the brain drain is that we don't have the ability to not only attract the talent, but also retain that talent, nurture that talent so that we can keep the talent on the continent. So what this J&J relationship has done is really exemplify that when you build capacity, when you develop capabilities, you have to engage with those capabilities. And you have to continue. The investment is not a once-off. You have to keep investing in capacity building. Keep investing, keep investing. And of course, the consequence of that then we provide an absorptive capacity to attract the talent, to nurture that talent, and to retain it on the African continent. So I think this J&J relationship, I think, is a tremendous example of how, when we build capabilities, we have to engage with those capabilities. So when I reflect on the last 12 years of our existence, what are the critical success factors? What are the lessons that we have learned in this journey of developing capabilities in a much more sustainable manner? I think the first lesson is this. First of all, it is about infrastructure. Infrastructure in a very broad sense. Secondly, is having a globally aligned project. When you have a globally aligned project, it is not just a matter of avoiding duplication, but what it does is that because the project is globally aligned, then of course, there is mutual interest with multiple partners. And where there's mutual interest, there is mutual responsibility. And where there's mutual responsibility, there is mutual accountability. So a globally aligned project is a critical ingredient in really fostering this network of partnerships model. The third lesson that we have learned precisely for this is that we don't need to wait until everything is in place. Because we have a globally aligned project, the contributions that we have to make is that you focus on what you can do in your environment without wishing that you had everything. And then, of course, you can tap into the network of partners to address the gaps that you have. Because of the mutual interest of focusing on that project, this has been a very powerful mechanism for us to be able to move projects forward. The other ingredient is really having experience on the team. And this is the example that I was providing with a J&J, where our local scientists are having access to very strong mentorship on the job training from very experienced scientists from J&J. So why is this an issue? Because money follows good infrastructure. Money follows a globally aligned project, and money follows a network of partners. So this is really the model that I think we have really advocating for in terms of developing a critical mass of skills here, is a network of not just research partners, but also a network of funders. And that's been a critical ingredient for success. So it's the role of the government of South Africa, and we'll be hearing from Ben Durham, who's representing government here. The role of industry in this partnership, and we'll be hearing from Helen Fletcher as part of J&J, but also product development partnerships that have become a critical ingredient in fostering innovation. Kerry, I'm going to hand back to you so we can move forward with the rest of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I think that's a brilliant start. Just to know for everybody that there is going to be a chance to ask questions. Please use the Q&A, and there's even going to be an opportunity to vote on the questions you like the best, and those will go to the top. So if you're shy to ask questions, but you fancy somebody else's questions, just put your vote there, and the more votes, the quicker it will be. I think I love that introduction, which just goes perfectly into our next speaker, who is Helen Fletcher. Helen Fletcher comes from J&J. She's the Scientific Strategy and Innovation Lead for Emerging Pathogens at the Global Public Health Program of J&J. And she's going to take what Kelly mentioned about their partnership and explain how they came to link up and why H3D is the ideal partner, and just give us a little bit more detail about the J&J Satellite Center model for industry and academic partnership. So over to you. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Kerry, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to participate in the panel today, and also for sharing some thoughts on our partnership for innovation with Kelly and with H3D. You had heard my introduction. I'm Helen Fletcher, and I have some responsibility within Johnson & Johnson for our Centres for Global Health Discovery. So a little bit about that model in general before I go on to the partnership specifically with H3D. So I guess the ambition of our Centres for Global Health Discovery were to address two major gaps. So first of all, to develop therapeutics for unmet global health challenges. And this is both for entrenched threats, such as tuberculosis, drug-resistant tuberculosis, but also for new and emerging threats. So this includes antimicrobial resistance, but also viral pathogens, and particularly pathogens that we might see escalating due to changes in climate or to pandemic outbreaks. So we have our focus on the unmet medical need, but we also have a focus on equity. We want to address the equity gap as well. So, and we're doing this in two ways. So first of all, we are using cutting edge research and development to find solutions for these entrenched and emerging threats, which are impacting low resource settings. So quite often what companies might do, and certainly seems the fastest and easiest route, is to perhaps repurpose drugs, look at amending existing solutions, and seeing how you can make that easy to access in a low resource setting. What's slightly different about our approach within global public health at Johnson & Johnson is that we want to use cutting edge R&D and innovation to address these challenges. And we want to do that because we think that these are very difficult and complex health challenges. And actually, why not? Why shouldn't we be using and deploying our best R&D and the best capability to actually find the solutions for the people who are most affected? And of course, we're doing that very much in partnership, because we know that these incredible challenges that we're trying to address, we're not going to do that alone. As a even within a large pharmaceutical company like Johnson & Johnson, there is a limit to the capability that they have, and we are really essentially dependent on our partners to achieve this ambition. One thing that we've got quite a proud history of within global public health is what we call the laboratory to the last mile. So here we're very much focusing on the early stage R&D, but then we have that whole development pipeline, which means that we can actually manufacture the drug, get the drugs licensed, get them out to the patients who need them, thinking right all the way through the supply chain to make sure that not only are we doing the R&D, but we're getting the impact to patients at the end of the day. And the 3 centres that we've launched so far, so our first centre was only launched in 2021, so this is still a fairly new model. And the first centre was focused on tuberculosis, including drug-resistant TB. Our second centre was with H3D and Kelly Jabali, focused on antimicrobial resistance. And there we're working on a pathogen, Acinetobacter baumannii, which has a particular impact in low resource settings and is actually quite neglected elsewhere in the pharmaceutical industry. And our third centre and our most recent centre is focused on broad spectrum flavivirus therapeutics. So here, recognising that with climate change, we're going to see a spread of mosquito vectors, and a lot more of the world is going to be exposed to flavivirus infection. And so we're looking for therapeutics which would work against these pathogens. So a few more words about the model, and why this model we believe is going to work and is going to be different from the way that we've worked before with academic institutes. Usually when industry collaborates with academia, we'll have a conversation, you'll go away, and after 3 months, you'll come back with some data, we'll discuss it, you'll go back again, do another experiment, you'll come back, and then maybe priorities have changed, or maybe a new technique has come along. And so we see this slow back and forward iterative process of development and innovation. What's really different with H3D and the Centre for Global Health Discovery is that the scientists are working together on a weekly, sometimes daily basis, having conversations, planning together. When things are going in a different direction, you can have that direct engagement. And so it really accelerates the way that we're doing drug development. And this makes the model a close working relationship. It means that we can really drive that cutting edge research, and it means that we're much more effective and cost effective in the way that we're developing impact. So as Kelly mentioned, this partnership didn't come from thin air. It was built on a history of engagement since 2016. And I think that is one of our reasons for success. But another reason for success is that we're working in the region of need. And I think that brings a really unique perspective. So when we're working with H3D, we are much more focused on impact for patients and perhaps less focused on individual academic pursuit than we might be if we were working without the region. And I think that that's an incredibly powerful thing, and really drives forward our impact. And as Kelly said, I think this makes our ambition as pharma actually more similar and aligned with the ambition of H3D. And it's this alignment of ambition which is really crucial for achieving impact. So we're really excited to continue our collaboration with H3D and our other academic partners through our Centres for Global Health Discovery, and I can't wait to see what we can achieve together in the next few years.
Thank you so much, Helen. I think that's really exciting, learning on the job and in real time, rather than, as you say, waiting. I think both you and Kelly have highlighted that, and that sounds extremely exciting. So the next speaker is another person who one of the crucial ingredients, obviously, is that you need a regulatory environment that enables scientific development. So the next speaker is from government. Ben Durham is the Chief Director of Bioinnovation at the Department of Science and Innovation in the South African government. And he's responsible for the implementation of the South African bioeconomy strategy and oversees a whole lot of innovation initiatives in agriculture, health, industry and environment, and indigenous knowledge. He's going to talk to us about how government is working across a whole lot of sectors, including the private sector, to enable a thriving innovation ecosystem, including how they're addressing intellectual property protections. So Ben, over to you. Thanks.
Excellent. Good afternoon from where I am, and thanks very much for the invitation to join this. It's always good to partner with people who are successful. So Kelly, thanks for sharing your success with us. It's really good news. We've been asked to give 3 points, so please bear with me. I'm not touching on everything that government does, but I'm going to touch on 3 points only. First is vision and balance. The second is excuse me. The second is partnerships, and the third is intellectual property. So starting with the vision and balance, government is tasked with an incredibly difficult task, really, ultimately looking for a productive, a capable, and a satisfied citizenry. And to achieve this, we need to balance the interests of all the stakeholders, and everyone is obviously a stakeholder in achieving satisfaction, capability, and productivity. So we start with the vision. It's critically important that government has a vision. In this particular case, we have a bioeconomy strategy of South Africa published in 2013, which outlines really where we are hoping to be. But the most important factor then is balancing the tensions between all these conflicting interests. In the science and innovation space, there's obvious tensions between the public sector and private sector, between academic and science council researchers, between infrastructure needs and project support. And ultimately, what we have to do is find the happy medium, most often, which can drive us towards that comfortable state where we're looking for. But in some cases, we've got to make the difficult decisions which are not going to be satisfying the interests of some stakeholders. But ultimately, it's the balancing those tensions and making sure that the vision is clear. And ultimately, what we're hoping to do with all these balancing acts that we conduct is to achieve a satisfied citizenry that believes in what we're doing is for the national good. The second point then is partnerships, and both Kelly and Helen have spoken to this. Government, for example, is terrible at commercialization. We can't do it. So what we need to do as a seed funder of science and innovation, we have to partner with other role players to ensure that the full value chain that we are seeking to achieve has the necessary skills and competencies and support infrastructure to enable it to be successful. Ultimately, we're looking for an enabling system. The third point, and I know I've run out of time, is intellectual property. And I'm focusing particularly on the awareness side. We need South African citizenry, but particular people who involved in the science world, to be aware of intellectual property and the potential that it has for valorization. This is not only to enable innovation, but it actually ultimately will grow the GDP as industry develops. But on the bigger side, we also want to work with the world, but we also want to ensure that the benefits at least partly accrue to South Africa. So that's my time up. I'm afraid really so much that is happening that government is intervening on, but those perhaps are three highlights where we focus a lot of attention. Thank you.
Ben, I think that you were quicker than you thought, because you still have another minute. So we'll catch you in the question time. Thank you so much. And thanks for your honesty. When do you hear government saying we're not good at something? It's great to hear that you're humble enough to say we need to build a partnership with other people who have expertise. So that's really refreshing. The questions are coming in, so that's great. There's some really interesting questions. Please do get your questions in, everybody. The next speaker is someone who was a former student of Kelly's. Elizabeth Kigonda is the principal research scientist at the Center for Traditional Medicine and Drug Research at the Kenya Medical Research Institute. And she is going to speak to us about how H3D is helping people in other countries to develop their capacity for drug discovery and development. So Elizabeth, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kerry, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for having us. I'll just quickly start by just echoing what the other speakers have mentioned. And I'll start by saying that in our countries in Africa, we have a number of challenges as far as drug discovery and development research is concerned. These challenges have actually been mentioned. And okay, so if I could quickly just list them and then say how H3D has come in to rescue the situation, kindly allow me to do that. So the first challenge, like Kelly said, we have a serious low number of skilled scientists, lack of infrastructure, proper partnerships, government support, and funding. So those are the main challenges we've been facing in my country, and I believe that that is the case in most of the African countries here in the continent. So how H3D has helped to fill the gap. So they've been training Africans, and this is actually way back before even H3D Center was founded. So most of us in Africa, many of us have actually benefited from this training. I was actually in Cape Town, and that's where I acquired my PhD degree. And I would want to mention that it's important for government to be involved, because, like, for example, when I was training there, my scholarship was actually from the South African government. So government support is very important as far as ensuring that we are building capacity in this area of drug discovery and development research. At the same time, while I was there, H3D ensured that we had exchange programs. We were able to visit other labs abroad, and I think that exposure helped to build our skills and to know how to do proper drug discovery and development research. And we were able to also network. Remember, partnership is a problem in Africa. So this kind of exposure is very important in ensuring that we are able to know whom to reach out to whenever we need, any form of assistance. The second point I would want to mention that H3D has initiated is mobilization of funds. I think Kelly talked about the grant challenges, seed money that has enabled several of us in Africa to be able to start drug discovery and development projects, which are actually currently running. And during this time of the award, we have also had opportunities to participate in mentorship programs and even to benefit from the Johnson & Johnson partnership with H3D. So, for example, for me, I was able to visit, I was awarded a scientific fellowship award, and that was for about 1 year, and I was able to visit the labs in Belgium at the Janssen Pharmaceutical Company. So all these initiatives, of course, are going into helping Africans to be able to drive this kind of research. One last thing I want to mention is what is currently happening through the initiative of H3D, of course. We are having now collaborations that are coming into place amongst us in Africa, so that now we can work together and leverage on our different capabilities and seek funding together, so that eventually the goal is to ensure that we have products and medicines coming from Africans and solving African health problems. I think I want to stop there, Kerry. Thank you.
I think that was a perfect place to stop, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. I think Kelly in particular, I've had discussions with him talking about how some of the medicines that are developed for people in the North are not appropriate for African people. And that's why it's so essential that we have our own drug discovery and development on this continent. Then our next speaker is Hannes Milan. He's the Managing Director of Chemical Process Technologies Pharma, or CPT Pharma. He's got a PhD in organic chemistry and a master's in business leadership. And since he joined CPT, he has overseen the 5-fold growth of the company. So he's definitely someone you want on your team. He's going to highlight the gaps in skills development and talk about how these are being addressed through a partnership with H3D. Over to you. Thanks, Hannes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this panel and give a perspective from an API manufacturer on the African continent in the health innovation ecosystem, and the way to promote that and give access to affordable and good quality medicines across the continent. CPT Pharma is a privately held company that was established in 2014 to commercialize the technology that we've developed in-house for the manufacturing of some APIs that we've identified as critical for the South African health system. For a viable API manufacturing industry, one needs competitive technology and skilled resources that can develop, implement, and manage these technologies. As a company, we've had first-hand experience of how limiting a lack of skilled resources can be once start to implement the project like we did, starting from scratch with technology development laboratory all the way through to commercial manufacturing. And that's why the work that H3D is doing is so important to us. The work they're doing to promote, not only promote the innovation sphere or the innovative the innovation around the health technology development on the African continent, but more important, also looking at the skills required to support that ecosystem and focusing on developing those skills across the whole value chain. The importance of partnerships have been mentioned by most of the previous speakers, and we certainly believe that without partnerships, one will not be able to develop this successful. One needs a strong partnership between industry and university so that one can focus on the development of specific competitive technologies required for some of these products, and then provide that opportunity for universities to train people in the technology. Industry has the responsibility to train people on the implementation and operation of those technologies, such as quality systems and standards and regulatory processes and requirements for these drugs to get into the market. Very important in this whole relationship is government, has also been mentioned before. Government is a very important enabler in this ecosystem, not only through policies and national strategies, but as seed funding required to establish critical infrastructure and research capacities. As a company, we've been very fortunate in the support that we received from the Department of Science and Innovation in South Africa. We are co-hosting a research laboratory with them where we are developing and training process chemists, analytical chemists, and being able to take technology from a very small scale and scale it up. With the support from the department, we've also been able to build a pilot plant, multi-purpose pilot plant, that has been approved by the local regulatory authority to be of a GMP standard. And in this plant, we can scale up the technologies that we develop in our laboratory, but also use the capacity to start manufacturing products that will be, or product that's required for your regulatory certification and application, and also use this facility to produce material that can be used in clinical trials. One gap that we still have in this value chain is the ability to manufacture materials for preclinical trials. We've got the human resources, but at this stage, we don't have the facility to do that. And I think it's something that's really critical to complete the whole manufacturing value chain on the African continent. The context from Africa where we're sitting, and I would like to emphasize what Kelly has said, is that we can't and shouldn't wait for circumstances to change. One should leverage on what you have, build on the capacity that you have, because nothing breeds success like success. Once you've demonstrated what you're capable of doing, interest and support will follow. And I think what H3D was able to achieve over the last 7 to 8 years is a testimony to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hannes. I think that's, Hannes is on the ground trying to build a business and explaining to you all the components that he needs, and government as the enabler, as well as all the other components is what's so important. There's so many questions about partnerships and how to build partnerships in the Q&A. That's clearly what people are really interested in finding more about, because that seems to be the missing ingredient is not the knowledge about how to connect everybody together, which I think H3D has done so successfully. So we're going the full circle, and we're going back now to H3D, to Susan Winks, who's the head of research, operations and business development at H3D. And she's going to talk to us a little bit more about the skills development vision that the H3D Foundation has got, and also apparently announce a new partnership, which is pretty exciting. So over to you, Susan.
Great. Thank you so much, Kerry. And thank you everyone for joining us today. So I'm going to loop back again to where we started. So as you know, the H3D Center at UCT has been going for about 12 years now, and there was a lot of capacity building activities happening through the center. It was in 2019 that we decided we actually needed to set up a separate vehicle to really enable skills development across the continent, not just within the H3D Center. And this was to build on the activities that we had already started within the center. So we set up the H3D Foundation in 2019, actually before COVID, but with the idea that we really wanted to look at addressing and strengthening the value chain right from drug discovery through to development, and looking at what are those critical gaps that we want to fill, how do we strengthen the networks and partnerships, and here it's very critical that we include industry and governments and researchers, the academic researchers as well, to really get those networks functioning properly, and how do we support the development of scientific leadership. So some of the critical differentiators about what we're trying to do when we talk about capacity development is that we're really looking at on-the-job training, developing people, the scientists, through the projects that they're working on, and really enabling them to become scientific leaders in their field. So we're not trying to train people en masse. We really are doing strategic projects, strategic initiatives to strengthen the whole innovation system on the continent. And as Kerry mentioned, I'm very excited to announce that one of our partnerships has just been funded. And this actually, from, again, looping back to where we started with how has COVID-19 influenced how we do this, one of the critical issues that came up again and again in all the conversations we were having is manufacturing on the continent. And I think we all felt the gap during the pandemic, and we're very aware at how vulnerable we were sitting on the continent without having these capabilities locally. So this was one of the first projects that we prioritized as the foundation to really try to get funding for and support for. And really pleased to announce that USAID, through their Matrix project, is going to be funding a one-year pilot project for API manufacturing. So let me tell you a little bit more about this project. I think what is really exciting about it as a pilot project is it includes the critical partnerships. We have a tech company in California. We have a skills development company in California, the Oak Crest Science Institute. We have a local industry partner, CPT Pharma, and we've got an academic partner, which is UCT. And between these partners, we can quite quickly train up postdocs and do a technology transfer from California, working with the suppliers to get that flow reactor technology embedded at UCT, and quite quickly work to start optimizing the synthesis of antiretrovirals. And with CPT on board as an industry partner, as soon as we're able to show any improvement in the process, we can actually license the technology to CPT Pharma and immediately start translating to have an impact in the local market. And I think what is quite clear is if we're doing this in Africa, we need to have a cost competitive advantage. We need to have a technology that's going to allow us to do it rapidly with less infrastructure. And that's what this particular piece of equipment is going to allow us to do. It's got a very small laboratory footprint, and it can churn out kilogram quantities of APIs. We do see this project as well as addressing one of the critical gaps that Hannes has already mentioned, in that we need to be training up scientists to feed the job markets locally. It is one of the concerns, at least CPT Pharma as well, where are the skilled scientists that are now going to work here? We can build the facilities, but we also need to be feeding it with the right human resource talent. And again, so this is why for us, embedding this type of program within academic institutions where you can have a continual pipeline of training up new scientists and partnering immediately with an industry partner where you can actually have the jobs. So those are the critical success factors that we identified, and we're very excited that this has now been funded. We see this as a pilot project. The initial funding is $700,000 with the idea that we can rapidly expand it and bring more partners on board and put the technology at other academic institutions across South Africa, but also more widely across the continent, as we can show that this model works. And I know there are lots of questions, so I think I will leave it there, and yes, and we can get into the exciting part, which is the discussion.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I think how exciting is that to hear about an innovation happening right now There are a lot of questions, and there are a lot of them, as I said, related to partnerships. So I think there haven't been votes. So I think I'm just going to take them from the top, and I might just group some of them together. The first one, and there are actually two, from Sultan Suleiman, Professor of Pharmaceutical Sciences at Jimma University in Ethiopia. I'm really interested to work with partners from pharmaceutical industries like J&J, funding agencies, etc. However, the poor research infrastructure is limiting our access and acceptability to global partners. Please suggest possible strategies of improving these limitations. And later on, he also says we really need collaboration with partners in any way possible. Please suggest any collaboration on pharmaceutical project development. So I think that's, Kelly, I think probably you can take that, but also Helen.
Yeah, I think the on the question of improving infrastructure, I think this is I think partly the responsibility of not just the institution, but also of the local government, because that ultimately, when we started doing the projects that we were doing at H3D, it was really important with the government support from the South African government, but also within the University of Cape Town. And I think that that's really is a critical ingredient, is for us to own that responsibility, to do our bit in terms of developing the local infrastructure. So the answer to that question for me is straightforward, is really is appealing to the local government and the local institutions to do their part, because we cannot attract projects if we don't have the right infrastructure. And this is more than just, as I said, a physical building, but it's systems that work. And this is a model I think we have also been able to pioneer in H3D. Helen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is difficult. You're in a difficult position, and from a pharmaceutical company perspective, there are some examples of pharma multinationals engaging with individual laboratories on the African continent, but there's not enough. Those instances are few and far between, and I think probably the collaboration with H3D is perhaps the leading one example of that. However, there is really in the last few years increasing recognition of the need to encourage all forms of R&D and manufacturing and capability within the African continent. So there are now networks that have been established, and Kelly spoke about the network funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation around the development of therapeutics and manufacturing capability and training. I know of a network focused around vaccine manufacturing, for example. So I think if I was in your position, I would be identifying, what are these networks that have been funded? Is there any engagement already from academic institutes within your country? Is there any way that you can get engaged in the networks which will actually support you in your ambition? And then really it's, I think once we've demonstrated success, once we can show that actually, achieving innovation on the African continent is possible, that it can be done, really effectively and have impact, then I think we'll see a lot more engagement from pharmaceutical companies, and it will become much easier to reach out. But to start with, as a starting point, I'd go and identify these networks.
Thank you so much, Helen. We have not very much time left, so I'm going to see that there was one very popular question, and that's from Danielle, we are a French-based consulting company providing pharmaceutical services. How can we support pharmaceutical activities in Africa? Is there a repository platform where countries or organizations publish their needs, or where requests or partnerships are published? Kelly, maybe you could also take that, or Susan.
Susan?
You waiting for me to answer, Kelly? So in fact, this is one of the gaps that we are trying to address, and certainly the H3D Foundation is talking to a lot of people on the continent doing research, as well as international companies and PDPs who would like to support research on the continent. And we are trying to help build that network and link it in. So yes, please do reach out to us, and we can let you know at least about the partnerships we're already aware of and see how you could fit in. And thank you. Thank you for joining today.
It's great to have someone offering help. Steph Flores is a student in global health. In creating partnerships within Africa, do you have a go-to country to partner with, or do you keep in mind that every African country is in your network? What made you inclined to choose the said countries? Do you see which countries are easily improving or had substantial improvements following partnership? Helen, I think that one must be for you.
Yeah, sure. And what I say here is that actually it's not about the country, it's about the people. It's about the talent, it's about the capability. So that is what drives, where we interact at J&J, where we build our partnership. Yeah, it's all about the person. So yes, again, if I was starting from scratch, then build your network through the people who have managed to do this, and if you go outwards from there, then hopefully you'll be able to extend your own partnership with industry.
Here's a great question for Kelly. How were you able to convince your government and your international industrial collaborators to see value in partnering with H3D, considering the high level of skepticism shown towards science originating from Africa? And that's from
Yeah, so I think
Sorry.
first of all, when it comes to government, I think as a scientist, I think what is important is to build the business case for doing R&D. We have so many social problems. The question is, why should the government invest in R&D? And I think the business case is that before we even see a product, we're creating jobs, we're building the infrastructure, we're attracting talent, and that is very important. And so government, that is a responsibility that all of us have to share. It's not just a responsibility of government. So when government sees that, of course, that is very much consistent with what government would like to see, jobs being created. So using science for development and putting across that business case, I think is very important to government. When it comes to industry, I think I'm going back to Helen's point as well. So it's about the people. When you have got the talent and the capability, there can be perceptions about what comes out of Africa. But at the end of the day, when you have a track record, the track record is there. It will speak for itself. And so when we began working with J&J, as Ellen was saying earlier, it is the people, what they see, the infrastructure, the capabilities. Those cannot be hidden, because when you have fruit, it's there for everybody to see. So yes, there can be perceptions, but when there's evidence of what you've done, people will come. It doesn't matter who you are and where you are. The evidence of what you've done speaks for itself. Ben, I think, would like to contribute to that as well. Ben?
So yes, if I may, from government perspective, we've posted our vision, which is the bioeconomy strategy, and what Kelly did really is he spoke to what he can contribute to this bioeconomy strategy, and explain very clearly what are the requirements and what are the positive impacts that will arise from that thing. So as everyone is saying, it's critically important to develop your networks and to talk to people and to develop your track record. But ultimately, if you can say you are doing what this vision is requiring, then it's a relatively easy mix. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's all the questions that we have time for, but I think there's a lot of hunger for knowledge about partnerships and how to build them. Thanks to everybody for taking part. There were over 130 people who contributed. I'm going to hand over now to Greg Perry, who's the Assistant Director General for the IFPMA. He's responsible for IFPMA's Africa engagement, and he's the perfect person to end off this webinar. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Look, thank you to all our panelists and to you, Kerry, for moderating, and special thanks, obviously, to Susan and Kelly. We really value this partnership that we have with H3D and the Foundation. We value it because, as an industry, we're committed to innovation, but not just for our company and not just for our sector. I mean, we value innovation in its totality, and we're very committed to this partnership and working on the African continent to encourage and to help leverage whatever we can to ensure there is more local innovation in Africa. And that's one of our, our key parts of our Africa engagement strategy. The model that Kelly has talked about, which is the model based on a partnership of networks or a network of partnerships, is really key, because that enables all the contributors to be leveraged to provide their best part, what they can do in a partnership. And what I love about what is happening here is people aren't just talking partnerships, they're doing partnerships. And that's the key thing. And this is a wonderful partnership that we're seeing. We're seeing it with the industry, we're seeing it with government, we're seeing it with academia, we're seeing it with drug development. And also, of course, congratulations on the new funding that you have for your new project. And I know how important the development of local APIs is for the African continent. It is very critical, actually, for the future of local production in the industry. And in our declaration that we made as the European African Business Forum, which was local manufacturers and international manufacturers based on the continent, one of the points we put in there was API, amongst many of the other things that you talked about, which is capital, skills, regulatory, and IP. And finally, on the basis of partnership, as you said, there's mutual interest, responsibility, accountability, there's trust, there's transparency, and there's, of course, team spirit, which, of course, you're able to foster so much there. And Ben, I was really happy with also your statements around how the government is building what is required for drug development and for the private sector to operate, including the reference, I think, important there to intellectual property. So thanks again also to the 140 participants that joined. And all I can say here is watch this space, because it's only going to get bigger. Thank you very much, everybody.